Vapi has just dropped Workflows 2.0, a major upgrade to their conversational flow building tool. Instead of cramming every condition into a single prompt, we can now map out our AI voice agents visually step by step. That means we can now build agents with far more complexity and conditional logic without sacrificing clarity. And compared to the original version, these assistants feel significantly more dynamic, giving you the control of a single prompt, but with the power and scale of the full workflow system. And don't worry, I've found the new update to actually be easier to build with, and I'll show you why later in the video. My name is Brendan, and I've been creating AI agents for small to medium-sized businesses for almost 2 years at my agency, Inflate AI. We've built a lot of single prompt and conditional voice agents for clients, and I can say that this upgrade certainly makes it far more compelling to build with. One of the big changes for me is that we can now move through different stages using multiple different prompts rather than using the static variables like before. This makes it far more dynamic in which pathway it chooses, yet still quite conditional in its comparison of both of those prompts in making its decision. You'll get a better understanding of this when I actually run through the Vapi workflows. But another really big change is also the ability to convert any conversation step into a global node. Now, this is quite a game changer for escalation paths. These were previously messy or just outright hard to manage, but now jumping between flows or backtracking the paths is way more natural and is closer to how a single prompt agent would behave, but with the added real structure. I'll start by covering some of the already created templates from Vapi to showcase what's possible with the builder and how it all works. I'll then dive into building an AI receptionist for a real estate agent. And as always, I'll have all of the templates and resources from this video for free within my Skool community, linked in the description. So this right here is the brand new Vapi Workflows 2.0 builder. Now, I haven't actually jumped into the canvas yet. Obviously, this is just the main page. So I'll just go ahead and click create workflow. And right here are a series of templates of the brand new builder tool, the 2.0 tool. So obviously Vapi's Workflows tool existed before. I created a video on it about 2 months ago, although this has been pretty much revamped in the way in which we have to build agents and connect nodes together. It's really been reimagined. And so to get started, I'm just going to run through this lead qualification agent that Vapi has created, this template. I'm just going to run through everything step by step as to how they've gone ahead and shown how to structure an agent using the Workflows tool. And I'll just run through all the different features and functions and when to use what, and then we'll jump into building our own system. So if you are brand new to Vapi Workflows and you haven't yet played around with it at all, to give you a quick summary, ultimately what we're doing is rather than using a single prompt, so a single set of instructions that we guide everything about the conversation and about the agent all in one section, what we're doing is using this canvas display, which we can zoom in and out, we can drag around, move around. This is where we're going to be stringing together and connecting multiple different, you can think of them as single prompts, so multiple different single prompts, connecting them together. And this is going to enable us to reach a far greater level of complexity and conditional logic that trying to do on a single prompt would be a little bit complicated. And so this is great for building systems that are more complex or building systems that are more conditional. So if you don't want a user to go down certain paths, if they've gone down other paths, or it's done an API call and it hasn't pulled back a specific set of information, we can completely restrict the user from accessing certain information because it's not going to be using any sort of prompting that can possibly even get access to it. But once again, you're going to get a much better understanding as I walk through this template, and hopefully it's all going to make sense. So to get started on Vapi Workflows, right out the gate, you'll see our top node up here, which is called the introduction step. So the introduction step is obviously going to be the first part of our conversation. So that's going to be including the first message that's read out. It's going to be including everything to do with the first bit of conversation that we have with the system. And so one really big difference that you're going to notice compared to the original Vapi workflow system is just the level of options that we have available in a particular conversational step node. So right out the gate, there are a lot more settings that come with a single conversational step node, and you can see them all here. And I'll go through each setting step by step. So at the top here, we have the node type, and this is set to conversation. And you'll also see all of the other node types that we have access to. We can also access all the other node types by jumping over to the left-hand side and clicking add a node. And you can see here that we have 5 different steps. So we have the conversation node, an API request, a transfer call, end call, and a tool node. So comparing this to the previous Vapi workflows, they've actually reduced the amount of nodes that we had access to. If you can remember from the previous Vapi workflows, there used to be a gather step and there used to be a condition step. And these were previously used to sort of structure the decision-making process between moving from one conversational step to another conversational step. And so this is one of the really main things that's been revamped with Workflows 2.0, and it is far more simpler and more dynamic than before. But anyways, I'm gonna get back to that in just a minute. I'm just gonna run through this specific conversation step. So out of the gate, there are two different boxes that we get access to. One is the first message. So the first message is your traditional first message. So just like building on any other agent, this is going to be what's read out when the system is called into. So hello, this is Morgan from Growth Partners. And then there's a question there for the user. So that's gonna get read out right away. Then below this, we have a specific prompt. So this prompt is going to be used specifically for this step. And so at the moment, you can see this is called, you are Morgan from Growth Partners. Start with, hello, this is Morgan from Growth Partners. And then once again, it's got that question at the bottom there. So this is ultimately a very simple prompt that is purely targeting the specific step that needs to be completed at the start of the conversation. And so this prompt is just specific for this step. The next step that we have beneath the prompt here is the global node step. And this makes it really powerful to access all different parts of our workflow builder at any point during the conversation. Now, this is really critical. And this was something that wasn't really easy to do before, but now is super easy and makes it far more dynamic and much closer to the level of fluidness that we could expect with a single prompt. So you can see here, enable global node, toggle to make this node globally accessible. So this is available from any point in the conversation. So one of the most common workflow structures for building on Vapi workflows could be essentially creating two paths out of the start of the conversation. So if you're looking to gather the level of interest from the user, whether that's interested or not interested, and then the two flows that you have, potentially we could ask the user if they're interested. If the user says that they're interested, it's going to go down that pathway. Although for whatever reason, that user decides they're not interested anymore, they don't want to go down that path, we can set the complete other pathway to be a global node so that it can be triggered at any point during the conversation. Therefore, there's no messy back and forth conversation where the agent isn't able to help them out because it has access to all of those other global nodes to access and use later on. Below this, we have the model settings. So this is also brand new and just added to the Vapi workflows, is that we can now individually change both the model, the specific model. We can now individually change both the model provider that we're using, as well as the specific model within that model provider. And this is going to be super powerful for optimizing the overall structure of the voice agent. So rather than using one provider or one specific model for our entire agent, we can now start to use multiple different models. And this is super powerful because not every task is going to require the level of complexity that a super powerful model can handle. Some tasks are going to be super simple, and we can use a quicker and cheaper model to handle that super simple task. And we can use the more expensive, more intelligent models to handle the more complex tasks. And so this is ultimately going to save on costs. It's going to make it faster overall as a system. And so this is going to be super great for just optimizing our workflow agent overall. Then below the model settings, we have the voice settings. So if you'd like, you can actually change the voice or the specific voice provider that is being used at different parts of the conversation. So potentially you could build a multi-agent system using the Vapi workflows and actually swap the voice so that it could seem like they're speaking with a different agent, although all you've done is given it a new prompt and then given it a new voice to sort of mimic the idea that they're speaking with a different person. But that's super awesome that we can now enable that. We don't have to transfer a call to some other agent in order to get that level of effect. Then below this, we have the transcriber settings. So once again, this is just getting access to change the transcriber model that we're using. And very similar to the AI model, we can choose a better transcriber or a cheaper transcriber or a more expensive transcriber at any part of the conversation, depending on what's required. So in some cases, you could select a more expensive, a slower transcriber model that is more accurate at particular parts of the flow. And so this could be super helpful if you're looking to capture emails, you're looking to capture phone numbers, capture sensitive information. All of that stuff is where you could essentially swap out the traditional model with one that's going to take a little bit more time. It's going to be a little bit more extensive, although it's obviously going to capture it more accurately. And therefore, you also don't have to use that model all throughout the conversation. You can just use it when you need it. And so for example, if I look into some of the DeepGram models here, and I just scroll down into the list of models that DeepGram provides, you'll see here that they've got specific models for the medical industry, the finance industry, they've got drive-through, automotive. And so these are models from DeepGram that have been trained specifically on a lot of the common phrases and wordings that are used in those industries. And then lastly, for the conversational step node, we have an option to extract variables specifically. So this is sort of the replacement to the gather step that we had used previously on the workflows 1.0. This has now just been moved into the conversational step. And so it's just a block here at the end. And what we can do is essentially add in all of the different sort of settings to configure extracting specific values from the conversation. So in this case, if we wanted to extract our phone numbers, extract our email addresses, this is exactly where we can do that. So once again, very similar to how we do it on the traditional agents, we can use a string. And so we can essentially type in a prompt. This is the email of the user. So if they provide us with an email, we can just capture that directly into this variable here. So we create email string. This is the email of the user. Obviously, we can change this to be a number, a Boolean, or an integer, all different types of values that we can capture just using this step. So to continue on from that first step here, once this step has happened, this is essentially, I'm now going to quickly showcase what it sounds like if we go ahead and run this module.
Hello, this is Morgan from Growth Partners. Do you have a few minutes to chat about how we might be able to help your business?
So there you go. It went ahead and just read out the first message. So super basic overall. The main goal there is obviously just to read out that first message and then move on to the next steps. And so the next part of our agent is obviously going to be communicating and moving to our other steps. And so this is where one of the biggest changes has been made. It is also far more simpler to also use this now. So moving from the first node here, moving down the pathway, you'll see that it goes directly into this sort of yellow box. And this yellow box is the condition. Now the condition is automatically created when you create another block and you link them together. It will provide you with a condition to prompt. So the condition, compared to last time, is far more simpler and more intuitive from my end to use. So in order to set up a condition, all it is a single prompt. So quite easily, all that we need to do is just prompt it to go down that condition. So you can see here, user said they're too busy right now and seems potentially interested. So that's one pathway that they've set up. And if I click on the other pathway, user agreed to chat and shows interest in learning more. So obviously in their template here, it's super basic of a prompt, but it obviously does the job enough to move down these two pathways. Once that's occurred, it then just jumps directly into a brand new conversational node, very similar to what we had up here. And then this just goes through a whole new prompt with this set of questions. And then once again, moving down to another yellow condition block with another condition. So sufficient information gathered about their business, industry, pain points, and current systems. Once that's happened, it moves on to the next block here. And this block, once again, is just another conversation step. So this is far easier and far more intuitive than what they had before. Previously, in order to move between blocks, we actually had to set up specific variables and assign those variables based on what the user had just said. And so there was quite a bit of work that we needed to do, which was ultimately a bit unnecessary when you start to compare that to just giving it a prompt and just letting the AI decide which path it needs to go down. And it works really well. And obviously if you build out a really nice prompt, you can get it to work great. Another really key aspect that has been added to the workflow builder here that I'd really recommend you looking into is the global prompt. So the global prompt is very similar to what you may have expected when building out single prompt agents. So when you build out a single prompt agent, you build out everything, every condition, the role, the tasks, specific examples of conversational types. You build out everything in order for it to understand the conversation. And so this is something that we can still do when we're building out the workflow builder in the global prompt. So you can see here, define your assistant's core personality across all conversational nodes. So this is really where you're going to store all of the main sets of instructions and information that you want accessed at any point of the conversation. So obviously, if we're creating our persona and our specific agent's personality, then we will want that to be accessed at any point during the conversation. And so we can just very simply add that into our global prompt here. Other information would also include just general notes. So if we don't want our agent to answer a specific question a certain way, we can just add it in there and it will apply to every step in our entire flow. Jumping over to the right-hand side of this workflows template, you'll see here this purple block, which is a global node. So this has been created essentially to trigger a transfer of the call. So you'll see here that it's highlighted purple, and that's because it's been given the global node. If we go ahead and turn it off, it's now not going to be purple. Turn it on again, and now it is. And so this is a really good way to integrate our tools to be accessed at any point during the conversation. Obviously, if we want to enable somebody to transfer the call, we want that to be accessed at any point during the conversation, not just at certain steps. And so obviously having the global node function is super powerful and is obviously pretty necessary in order to have a fluid and dynamic experience, which is something that you would have expected and experienced with a single prompt agent. And obviously this will be a good practice to do with every type of API request and tool request that you implement into the system, prompting it like this is going to be the best way to go. And so the way that it's been set up here is that essentially the global node gets assigned to a conversation step rather than the transfer call step. So we add the conversation step, add the obviously global node. You can enter a condition for the global node once it's enabled. So user wants to speak to a human. So once somebody wants to speak to somebody, it's going to trigger that global node, confirm that the user wants to speak to a human and ask them what they would like to speak about. So in this case, it's actually added up a follow-up question. If somebody does want to have a transfer, it's then added this step here that the user's confirmed that, then the call will go ahead and get transferred. Another really big upgrade to the Workflows Builder is that the transfer call module is far more extensive. So we can now do quite a bit more than what we could do before. This now enables us to get access to all of the traditional call transfer steps that we would have expected from your traditional agent on Vapi. So if we click add destination here, we can click on phone number. We can obviously add in the phone number to transfer to, all of these other settings as well with the caller ID, a message to the customer, description, all of this stuff, and most notably, the type of transfer. So with a Vapi system, there's obviously multiple different ways that we can actually transfer to other phone numbers. Notably, that could be a blind transfer where it's just it's a cold transfer to somebody that doesn't have any context as to what the transfer is about. Or we can actually do a warm transfer. So we can do a warm transfer with a message, and what that means is that we can prompt it so that the person who's being transferred to gets a little bit of context read from the AI as to what the call coming in is going to be about. And you can see there is quite an extensive set of options here as to how to set up that transfer and how to make it as best for the user possible. But it's great to see that there's obviously got all of these functions now accessible through workflows. But otherwise, for this specific template, if I just scroll down a bit, you'll see that there's quite a bit of conditioning going on. And ultimately, all that's happening is that they've got their particular blocks, the conversation blocks, and they've just got, in this case, 3 different pathways to go down based on the user's response. And in this case, they've got some qualification criteria to go down these different paths. So if the budget isn't right, we'll go down here. The timeline is within the right amount, or they didn't meet the qualification criteria, they have a different step for that. It'll go down these paths. And then ultimately, if each of these have been concluded with exactly what's been prompted, it'll obviously go ahead and hopefully end the call and wrap it up there. And just a quick note on something that I really appreciate on each of these conversational step modules, we actually have the cost and the latency added to each of these steps. So you can see here that this particular step is 9 cents a minute and the latency is 950 milliseconds. And you can see the individual steps as well. And so obviously, as you add cheaper models or more expensive models, that is going to update. And so it's really good to be able to obviously track that and see exactly which step is using up the most cost. So hopefully you've now got a good understanding as to how the Vapi Workflows 2.0 system works and how it's structured and how we can build these systems and communicate between each nodes. Because now I'm going to jump into building my own real estate receptionist. So jumping back into creating our own workflow. Once again, we're not going to be using any of these templates, although there are other templates that you can have a look through as well, just to learn a little bit more as to how to actually build with this system. Otherwise, I'm just going to click on blank, starting from scratch. We'll just hit create blank workflow. And as soon as we've done that, we've just been landed with our introduction step, which is obviously necessary for every agent. So it's put itself right on the top of our canvas. So the agent that I'm going to be building will just be a very basic real estate receptionist that is going to be taking incoming calls and essentially qualifying individuals to see if they're interested in selling their house, not interested in selling their house. Maybe they've got some questions about the business. And so we'll just handle all of those flows. So to get started, we'll build out a first message. So I'll just replace this with a proper first message. So I would say, hi, this is Emily, an AI phone agent with Blue Real Estate. How can I help you today? So first message, hi, this is Emily, an AI phone agent with Blue Real Estate. How can I help you today? Super basic. That'll start the conversation off. Then we're going to jump into our prompt. So once again, we need to remember this prompt is specifically for the first introduction node. This is not our global prompt for the entire agent. This is specifically the purpose and the goal for our first node. So a prompt for this could look like, you need to decide if the caller is interested in selling their property, not interested in selling their property, interested in buying a property, or just has some questions. So we're setting up the agent to be able to handle 3 different pathways. We are going to be looking at if the caller is interested in selling their property, buying a property, or just has some questions. We're going to build out 3 different pathways for the 3 different inquiry types, and we're going to be able to handle each of those. Coming down to the rest of the settings, this won't be a global node. This is not something that we need to really come back to later in the conversation. Model settings, we'll just keep this super basic for now. Although once again, this is something when you're building out a real system, definitely look at optimizing your model models to make the system overall efficient, as that is going to be a pretty big benefit of obviously using the workflows. So from here, what we're going to be able to do is just hover over that step and we'll see the plus button right here. Once you click that, it's going to provide us with the node steps that we can choose, and we're just going to click on conversation. So if we click on conversation, we can drag it right down here. It's going to automatically create this step. So this condition step is just going to get created automatically. And then all we need to do to create a secondary condition step is just click the plus button again, click conversation, and then automatically it's there again. And then we can also click in and click it again. And we can just continue doing that to create all the different flows for our particular agent. So I might drag this one here, drag these out here, and we can just set up our conditions very easily by modifying the condition prompt here. So in this case, if the user just has some questions, if the user is interested in buying a property, if the user is interested in selling their property. So there we have it. We've now got 3 different pathways based on the response that comes out of this question. We've got 3 different prompts that it's going to be evaluated against to determine which pathway to go down, and then it's going to hit these individual steps. So if the user is interested in buying a property, we're probably going to want to ask them a few questions about that. So thank them for wanting to sell their property. We now need to ask them a couple of questions. First, ask them if they have a property they are interested in, and then ask them for their price range. So thank them for wanting to buy a property. We now need to ask them a couple of questions. First, ask them if they have a property they're interested in, and then ask them for their price range. So pretty basic. Obviously, this is just a basic prompt to show you the understanding as to how to structure the assistant using the workflows. Otherwise, if we go ahead and give this assistant a call, we can go ahead and just see what the experience is like talking to this agent.
Hi, this is Emily, an AI phone agent with Blue Real Estate. How can I help you today?
Hey, I was just interested in buying a property.
Great. Do you have a specific property in mind? What's your price range?
Yeah, I was actually having a look at 123 Main Street. Our budget is around about the $500,000 range.
Thank you for that info. I'll make a note of it and pass it on to our team.
So there you go. Obviously that did what we needed it to do. It went ahead and read out the first message, moved down the right path based on the condition that we obviously set, and then just asked us the couple of questions that we prompted it to ask us. So worked exactly how we expected it to. And there you go. So now we can obviously go ahead and start to build out the conditions for these steps and build out the prompts for these steps as well. And then pretty much we just start to build from here and just continue to add on. So the next part that I'm going to add to this agent is the ability to answer general questions. This is something that was pretty easy to do when it came to the single prompt agent, and we're going to approach this in the exact same way. So I did just change one thing about our agent. So I actually just deleted the flow that was in relation to answering general questions, as this is something that we can do quite a bit smoother compared to the Vapi Workflows 1.0. So because of the global prompt that we have up here, this is where we can store our knowledge base. And so this also means that this information can be accessed at any point during the conversation. And so obviously that's going to be super helpful, as we never know when somebody is going to have a question. It could be right as they've called, right out of the gate, or it could be further down the line. If somebody's interested in buying a property, they're going to have questions about our services, and same goes if somebody's not interested, they're probably going to have some questions there as well. So to make it as smooth as possible, what we can do is go up to the global prompts right up here, and I'm going to go ahead and paste in a knowledge base that I just generated on ChatGPT that is sort of within the realm of a real estate agent. So you can see here, knowledge base, I just got some information. So company name, founded, headquarters, some random people's name and things like that. Information that we can retrieve at any point during the conversation. So I'll store that there. I'll go ahead and hit save. So another aspect is that I do want to change up my initial prompt. So you need to decide whether the caller is interested in selling their property, buying a property, and we're just going to remove this part, or just has some questions, because that isn't going to be a pathway that we're going to be using. We'll just remove that, add that there, and hit save. What we can now do is just call the system.
Hi, this is Emily, an AI phone agent with Blue Real Estate. How can I help you today?
Hey, I was just interested in learning about when you guys were founded and where you're located.
Blue Real Estate was founded in 2009 and is headquartered in Seattle, Washington. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know.
So there you have it. It was easily able to answer our question there from our knowledge base. And the other key thing is that it also just stayed on the node. So it didn't try to go down a pathway based on the question we gave it. It understood that the question was obviously not relevant to either, and just stood its ground and stayed at this node here. And that's super helpful, because now our entire flow for asking general questions is all contained within this first single prompt step. And then obviously, as somebody, indicates interest in one of these pathways, it'll move down those pathways as well. So I've just gone ahead and added in a few more conditions here just to showcase what is possible with this system. So overall, I've just added in an additional prompt for the users that are interested in selling. So thank the user for their interest in selling their property. Please ask them for their address and timeline for selling. From here, we can obviously go down 2 different pathways. We can send an API request to a CRM system. If we can send this to a spreadsheet system, anything that we want. We can do this exactly how we currently do it on a typical single prompt Vapi system. We can obviously get an endpoint, so we can send this directly to make.com, for example. We can do a post request, so we're sending information off, and we can just set up all of our headers and our request body here with particular values. So we can ask them for their address, so we can save that as a variable. We can ask them for their timeline, we can save that as a value as well. And then we can send that off to the CRM system to store that for some sort of an office to have a look through and understand, and obviously just capture all of those leads there. Otherwise, we can set up a different condition. I haven't set up these conditions here, but we can ultimately say, if the user doesn't want to provide their information, so maybe somebody doesn't want to provide all that information over the phone to the agent, what we can do is actually transfer the call to a human agent to continue that conversation from that stage. Otherwise, if the user wants to continue, please send their information to our system, and it will obviously go down that path in that case, and then we can continue on. We can ask them more questions after we've sent the main information, and obviously this can go on and on as to all the different flows and structures and use cases that you want to add onto the system. But ultimately, this is how to use Vapi Workflows 2.0. This is the sort of best practice for structuring it. It's quite a bit more simpler than what we had before with Workflows 1.0, where it was quite static in the conditions. But obviously now with the global prompts, with the prompt conditioning, quite a lot more dynamic, and we can build these systems to be quite fluid. If you are a business owner and you're looking into AI voice agents and you want to get one of these systems built out for your business, but this stuff's just too complicated for you and you want to get it built properly, feel free to reach out to us using the link in the description.